Nothing can sort of just spontaneously arise, nothing can just spontaneously disappear, because everything's connected. Every sort of phenomena we're aware of, it has a connection with something else. Welcome to Dharma Night again. And if you remember, if you were here or looked at the video online of a couple of weeks ago, Viranaga was talking about Buddhist cosmology. And we were sort of learning about, infinite distances and infinite periods of time and thousands and tens of thousands of worlds and multiple planes of existence, pretty sort of cosmic sort of stuff. And this week, when we're talking about the Wheel of Life, we're bringing the focus right down to something more personal and reflecting on our own personal experience much more, different sort of, a completely different perspective. And the Wheel of Life, it's a pictorial representation of three very important teachings in Buddhism. It's a representation of conditionality, karma, and rebirth. They're maybe terms that you've heard of, but they're obviously fundamental, and it's all encapsulated in that image. So, in terms of conditionality, when the Buddha became enlightened, one of his profound sort of realizations was that of conditionality, and he said, "This being, that becomes. From the arising of this, that arises. This not being, that does not become. From the ceasing of this, that ceases." So, so everything has conditions or causes which bring them about, or bring phenomena about. And, so it may not sound so surprising, we're quite familiar with that idea. But but if we think about it a bit further, it means that, of course, that if that's the case, then nothing can sort of just spontaneously arise, nothing can just spontaneously disappear, because everything's connected. Every sort of phenomena we're aware of, it has a connection with something else. So from our personal immediate environment out to the sort of far reaches of the universe, everything has a connection. And that sort of follows on from that rather simple statement. But the Buddha wasn't just talking about, if you like, material things. He was talking about our consciousness. So, the way we experience ourselves and the way we experience the world is conditioned upon our preconceptions and our preconceptions about the world. And if they change, then our experience of the world and our experience of ourselves changes too. And he said that to actually realise what he's speaking of is very, very difficult. It's not as simple as, in fact, that statement may lead us to believe. And he says, profound is this doctrine, hard to understand, hard to perceive, tranquil, sublime, beyond the realm of logic, intelligible only to the wise. You will hardly understand it without patience, devotion, and effort. So, that sort of, it's not a simple thing to directly realise it. To have some sort of broad rational understanding of conditionality is one thing, but to actually directly experience it is something far different. So, as I said, the Wheel of Life is a pictorial representation of conditionality, but it's a particular type of conditionality. In Buddhism, there are 5 levels of conditionality. They're called niyamas, which means levels. And the first 3 are things which we'd probably be quite familiar with. They sort of basically correlate with what we would understand as physics, then biology, and our mental experience. And that's that. So of course, in science, if I stand there with a rock in my hand and I let it go, I know that due to gravity it'll fall to the ground. And maybe even if I'm clever enough, know the speed it falls and things like that. So that's a sort of physical conditionality. And they're recognised in Buddhism, but that's not really what this picture's talking about. It's talking about the 4th level, and to some extent the 5th level of conditionality. And the fourth level of conditionality is called karma. And karma is a word you've almost undoubtedly heard of. It means an action, and a specific type of action. It means an action, a willed action. So it's not something we do, if you like, by mistake. It's something we deliberately choose to do. And the conditionality aspect of karma is that whatever action we take, so it can be a thought, something we say, or something we actually do, it has a consequence. There's a there's a karmic consequence of that action. And broadly speaking, if we act out of greed, hatred, or delusion, then the consequences of that action, from a karmic perspective, will bring us unhappiness, and perhaps unhappiness to others as well. And the opposite's true. If we act out of love, wisdom, and generosity, then happiness will follow. And there's a very oft repeated teaching from the Dhammapada, the very, very first teaching of the Dhammapada, which I can never reliably remember. So I'll read it. And it says, "Experiences are preceded by mind, led by mind, and produced by mind. If one speaks or acts with an impure mind, suffering follows, even as the cartwheel follows the hoof of the ox drawing the cart." And the second one is the reverse of that. So if we act with a pure mind, then happiness follows as a shadow that never departs. So karma, then, this conditionality of karma is a natural law. It's not a law that's been handed down by the Buddha. It's not a law that's come from God. It's just something which is there. So if we behave out of, if you like, these positive motivations, then we'll experience happiness, and so will all those around us. And so there's nothing really we can do about it. That's just the case. That's just what the Buddha passed on to us. And to some extent, that's quite exciting, isn't it? Because if that conditionality weren't there, then we basically have to put up with our current lot. We just have to deal with what comes our way, and we have no agency. But what we're being told, very importantly, is that if we choose to act out of these positive motivations, then we can change our future experience. We can, what we're experiencing now is a consequence of how we've behaved in the past. And how we behave now will influence what we experience in the future. That's pretty sort of basic, but exciting stuff. If we follow that, we can actually change our future experience. So let's have a look at I'm sort of hoping you can get some idea of what I'm looking at here. It's the biggest thing I could find, but I'll describe the wheel. So it's basically a sequence of 4 concentric circles, and in the centre there's a dove, a snake, and a pig, and they're symbols for greed, hatred, and delusion. Sometimes the dove is replaced by a cock, but the same sort of idea. And in this picture, the pig of delusion is holding the snake and the dove in its mouth. And it's sort of suggesting that if we act out of greed and hatred, then we're acting from a deluded state of mind. In other representations, they're all biting each other's tail, which shows how they're all linked together. But the basic idea is that in the hub, in the centre, the motor of this wheel is basically these negative sort of emotions. And if we come out one circle to the next one, we can see it's divided into 2. It's got a black segment and a white segment. And in the black segment, beings are sort of descending downwards into hellish type states, and in the white segment they're ascending into heavenly states, depending on the extent to which they act out of greed, hatred, and delusion. If they act out of those, they're descending down to hell, and if they act out of love, wisdom, and generosity, then they're ascending to sort of heavenly states. And these states that we experience are described in more detail in the next circle outwards. So this is divided into 6 different realms, In the top realm, it's called if you like, the God realm, or the heavenly realm. And that's where, we have experiences which are sort of blissful, where we're contented, where we're not wanting for anything. And if you come round to my right, to the right, we come to the realm of the Asuras, or the Titans, or the anti-gods. And this is where, this is a competitive and aggressive realm, where sort of emotions like pride, envy, jealousy are fairly predominant, and the envy is largely on the beings of the heavenly realm. And then we come round to the next realm, which is the animal realm. So in the animal realm, that's where we're acting out of our basic animal instincts. Basically, we're looking to feed ourselves, protect ourselves, and reproduce. That's it's basic. It's not. We're not getting into elevating ourselves in any cultural way. We're just acting very, 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 very in a very animalistic fashion. And then at the bottom realm is the hell realm, and that's where beings experience intense anguish and pain. And then moving up, there's the realm of the praetors, or hungry ghosts. And basically, these are often symbolised by beings with very, very large stomachs and really tiny mouths. And it sort of symbolises the fact that no matter how they try, they can't sate their craving. And even if they do manage to find some nourishment, let's say, then it turns into poison in their mouth or fire in their mouth, so it causes them even more pain. So it's a pretty uncomfortable sort of realm. And then the last realm is the human realm, where we experience mixtures of joy and pain, not to any great extreme, but just where we live our lives perhaps in a normal way. So these are realms of experience, and you can look at it from how we might zoom around this in one day. We might have different sort of experiences from these types of realms in one day, or we might find that in one of them we predominate throughout our lives. But that's if you like a diagram which further explains, if you like, our mental states, our mental experience. And then in the last circle, the outer circle, there's a sequence of 12 images. And they're called the nidanas, or links. And it represents the process from birth to life, birth to death. And I'll go around them fairly quickly, because I haven't got enough time to go through them in any detail. But the first two pictures are of, firstly, a blind man sort of stumbling across quite a barren landscape. And the second one is of a potter making pots. And they represent, firstly, ignorance, and secondly, our basic habitual tendencies. And then the next 5 pictures, I'll explain why I'm grouping it like this in a second, are of a monkey wandering around in a tree, representing consciousness, some people in a boat, representing at the form of our body, a building with 6 windows, representing our senses. So in Buddhism, it's our normal 5 senses plus our mind, which is counted as a sense. And then there's a picture of 2 people making love, which is representing contact, our essential experience with the world. And then a man with an arrow in his eye, which is representing feeling. It's quite a good illustration of feeling, isn't it? It's really an uncomfortable one. But all of these are basically our basic human capabilities. We have consciousness, we have our body with its senses, we have contact with the world, we see, hear, taste, touch things, and we have feelings as a result of those. And the feelings we're talking about here is just the immediate sensation. We have a response which is either of pleasure, of the sensation, or pain, or just neutral. It doesn't really move us one way or the other. So that takes us up to this man with the arrow in his eye. And then the next 3 images, there's a man in this picture who's sitting down drinking, and he's got he's got a glass in his hand, and he's got a couple of bottles by his side as well. So he's doing okay. And that represents thirst. So after we see the world, if we see something that we particularly particularly pleasurable, then we thirst after it. We want more of it. And the picture after that is grasping, and the picture is of a monkey grasping for fruit in the tree. And then the last picture in that sequence is of a pregnant woman, and that represents becoming. So the results of our actions have consequences. Things come off what it is that we grasp after. And finally, the last two pictures are of a woman giving birth and a man carrying a dead person to the cremation ground. So they represent birth and death. So it's quite a rich picture. And so that basically represents, if you like, through our life, the fact that we come into the world, and in Buddhism, we come into the world because we were formerly we were elsewhere. We've been reborn into the world, and we're reborn through our ignorance of this process and how to escape this process. And we bring with us our, if you like, our tendencies, our basic psychological, characteristics. We bring with us, and we're born with a consciousness and into a body with the sense organs, as I explained, and we experience the world, and on this wheel, this point between the man with the arrow in his eye and the man drinking, that's a very important point in the diagram, and this is a point where we all experience things, we all have feelings, we all have things we like and things we don't like, but we have a choice in how we respond to them. What Buddhism says is that we tend to crave pleasurable experiences and clamour after them, more and more of them, and we tend to be aversive towards painful experiences, and we try to push them away, and we try to sort our lives such that we have loads of pleasure and no pain, and it sort of doesn't work. We can't hold the world still, and the other way is to respond in a different way to craving, and how we do that is probably beyond the scope of this particular talk. But I just want to point out that particular point in the wheel. So the wheel, as you can see, is clasped by this sort of monstrous thing. It's actually it's called Mara, and he's the Lord of Death, or the Lord of Impermanence. And he holds this wheel before us. And the way we're supposed to look at this is not as a picture we're looking at, but as a mirror. And we're meant to see this. In this picture, we can see ourselves in somewhere in some places. And that's quite a powerful sort of way of thinking about it, I think, sort of clasped in his hands. But this escape route is also, between how we respond, how we behave karmically, if you like, between the actions we take, between our feelings in the world, and how we respond either with grasping or not with grasping. If we take the route out of there, then we are pointed towards the Buddha, who himself in this picture is pointing towards the full moon, and the full moon represents enlightenment. So the Buddha's Dharma points us towards, the Buddha's teaching points us towards enlightenment. And that sort of covers the picture. So lastly, I just wanted to read you, so I said at the beginning that the enlightened experience of the Buddha, one of the things he experienced was this recognition of conditionality. And I just want to read you a section from, actually it's not from this book, it's from Gautama the Buddha by Vishvapani, which is an excellent book. But let me just read you an extract from what was Gautama's experience at the time, just before he became enlightened, he became the Buddha. So it says, Gautama looked back through his life with its tangle of fears and desires, which he was now unravelling, back through the times that had moulded him, back through his childhood, and past his birth to the darkness beyond it. In a flash he glimpsed the infinity of past lives, through which he had wandered as the universe itself waxed and waned. The intimate details of each existence flew back: his name, his family, his appearance, where he found pleasure and what had brought pain, and the 100,000 deaths he'd suffered. Above all, he saw the pattern of those lives, how the effects of actions rippled across lifetimes and impelled him to repeat them. Gripped by craving, ignorance and hatred, Gautama had forged his own suffering over and over, and seeing that was so, he knew he could stop. So that's all I want to say on the Wheel of Life for now, and I'd like to talk to my friend Amra Pushpa a little bit more about the Wheel of Life.
Thank you, Amladana. My goodness, you've covered a vast, rich area in a relatively short period of time. I loved your quotes, and I think it's thank you so much for bringing in that image as well. I just had a question or a clarification around karma, because that's a really overused word in the West, and it's can be really misunderstood, and I think you explained it really well. But just to clarify, from the Buddhist perspective, if something bad happens to you, does that mean that you've done something wrong in the past, or do any of the other niyamas come in, the other patterns?
Yeah, I mean, so not the answer is not necessarily, because there are these other things. So when I was talking, I was talking about an understanding of science, wasn't I, and holding a rock and letting it fall to the ground.
Yeah.
If I accidentally a rock falls on my foot, it hurts.
Yes.
But if I deliberately drop a rock on the foot, so it's a willful karmic action, it still hurts just as much. There's no difference. So I can have something could fall from a tree and hit me, and that's not through any fault of mine. It's just a physical reaction.
We don't know, do we? You don't know whether whatever happens is a result of karma or not. It's just that whatever we do will have an effect.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to clarify that, because in other traditions there's a very different interpretation of karma. That it's quite fatalistic.
Yeah.
Something bad happens, it means you've done something unskillful.
Yeah.
So it can be. It can be quite unhelpful that way.
It's a far more sort of compassionate sort of interpretation, isn't it, or explanation of karma.
Yeah, and I think you said it relates to your intention, doesn't it? Like what's in your mind as well as how you act. Yeah, so that's so it's not just our actions; it's what we think of. Yeah.
I mean, you're saying how there's quite a lot of ground covered, and how rich it is, and honestly, you could probably spend so much time on any one aspect of the wheel. It is so rich. It's like you're glossing over when you go through things.
Yeah.
And karma, as you say, it's important to have it's easy to misunderstand it, and it is so important to really just understand that we have this agency, and what we do can help improve our future experience, but there are other things that are out there that might also contribute to our experience. It might be good, they might be bad, or whatever, but it's what we can do things about. Karma is what we can do something about. From a Buddhist perspective, the way the Buddha talks about karma, that's really, I find, quite encouraging. We're not helpless beings.
Yeah, we can have an effect. I mean, I like the whole idea that I can affect my future happiness by what my intentions are right now. So it's. And I love the image of the wheel. I just love that sense of things going round and round. And I think before I became a Buddhist, I had that sense about the world, like things going round, even in world history, but also, habits I've had that kept repeating themselves.
Yeah, I mean, it happens so often, doesn't it? We know, how we find ourselves reacting in the same way to things, and the same consequences come about. I mean, what I liked about the picture was it's just how condensed it is and how much that there is in it. And you know, this apparently in Tibet, so it's often called the Tibetan Wheel of Life, although it's not specifically Tibetan. But I think, you know, traditionally it would be in monasteries and the gate on the doors, you know, as a teaching tool, you know, and that's and you can see how useful it would be as a teaching tool, and how, you know, as a student you could just peer at it and just have, you know, and just get lost in it, really.
Yeah, and you mentioned, you know, there's this amazing cosmic perspective of rebirths, and that amazing quote you read at the end about the Buddha having a sense of his previous lives. But could this just apply to one life? You know, do you have to believe in rebirth to make use of it?
Yeah, I mean, the model can work with one life. And personally, I'm comfortable with the idea of rebirth, but I wasn't always.
Yeah.
If you'd asked me, you know, many years ago, I would have just used it as an explanation of my current life, and that's it. But I'm much more comfortable now with the idea of the rebirth. It's sort of it seems to ring true to me. You know?
Yeah.
But that's a personal view.
Yeah, I think like you, I kind of was resistant around that, but I found it really relevant to my current life, and it was particularly affected by the hungry ghost realm. I really resonated with that. Do you resonate with a particular realm?
I find that very painful, the hungry and very familiar.
Yeah, it's painful and familiar.
Yeah, and then, as you were saying, you know, about how we repeat our actions and find ourselves with the same consequences. And I think that realm is something like that, where we go after something and we know that we've done it before. It might be just buying something or looking for a relationship or whatever it is, and we know, and it leads to the same sort of result every time.
Yeah.
Sometimes very short-lived, sometimes quite long-lived. But I find that I don't know whether I relate to anything in particular. But, I think I'd stick with the human realm.
The human realm,
yeah.
What do you like about the human realm?
It seems quite real, you know. You know, the moderate pain, moderate pleasure. Yeah. You know, and I find this the heavenly realm, the God realm, where you're blissful and contented. I find it rather difficult to sort of, you know, to bring to mind. Of course, I experience those sorts of states very, very, you know, briefly. But to be in there for any length of time, I mean, maybe if I look at it from a short space of time, I can see that. But for any length of time, I find it difficult to imagine.
Is it because you know it'll change? You know that it's not permanent, or?
Well, it will, won't it?
Yeah.
And that's uncomfortable. Yeah.
I mean, you mentioned it, how painful the hungry ghost realm is. Do you find being aware of that suffering has motivated you to change anything in your life? You know, that it's helpful.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose the theory that I've spoken through is one thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
But then, how do you actually affect the change? You know, what do you do? So I pointed out this, you know, this gap between feeling and thirst. You know, and so the thirst being the response to the feeling you have. And it's so difficult to extend that gap. I mean, you know, obviously the things like meditation really help when you're more aware of what's going on in your mind, and you have this choice. You know, I mean, basically, and broadly, it's around, isn't it? Do I act from selfless motives or selfish motives? Yeah. And it's sort of tempting to go for the selfish motive, you know, first.
Yeah, that you want to be happier, is that right? Is that so selfish?
Well, then the teaching says that you know, the karma says that's, you know, by acting selfishly, that's not you're going the wrong way, aren't you? You're although, you know, it's sort of counterintuitive in a way, isn't it? Because, you know, you sort of quite often you think, well, I know I want that. Yeah, I was an example. I won't go there. I know I want that, but I know also that it won't actually satisfy me. You know, I'll be in the realm of the hungry ghost if I go on craving these things. Yeah. I won't be satisfied. What if I think about, someone else other than myself in a particular example, and if I do something for them, how will it help me? But generosity is one, isn't it? If we do something, if we give something to someone, sometimes it's difficult because we want to keep it for ourselves. But if we genuinely give it to someone else, and we happily give it to them without clinging on to it, then actually that makes us feel good, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Whereas
Yeah.
if we hold things to ourselves, we feel sort of greedy, and it's an uncomfortable feeling.
Sure. So it's not just about worrying about rebirth or anything. It's about becoming happier. Do you think? What might in this lifetime?
What if with the perspective of
Yeah. In terms
well, I don't have that view, but I imagine that yes, you would look at be about getting happier just in this lifetime.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I
guess it's both. Yeah.
I've spoken about it before, and I was surprised when somebody who I knew quite well and I'd studied with for quite a long time expressed the opinion that he didn't believe in rebirth, and that he was only following the Buddha's teaching because it made him happier in this life, and which is it's a very valid, logical feeling or belief, and I respect him for stating that. It's just not one that I hold.
Sure. It's quite true of quite a few Western Buddhists, though. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we won't go there at the moment. Yeah.
But we change, don't we? We
Absolutely.
We know. I think when we practice and study, and that is the teaching, that it's not multiple births.
Absolutely.
We can look at it the way we want to, but I personally, my opinion's been moved.
Yeah. And as you say, that was the Buddha's experience when he became enlightened. So
yeah,
if we're following the
who
Buddha,
are we to criticise?
yes. or question it.
Question.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Great, so I hope you enjoyed that Dharma Night talk. So if you did enjoy it, if you're enjoying our videos, I just want to ask you or encourage you to think about making a donation to the Brixton Buddhist community. We're a UK charity that relies completely on your donations to run everything here. And if this was a meditation class, there'd be a donation bowl that you could just put in £10 at the end of the night to help support the activities. But as you're watching this online, I just want to ask you to think about making an online donation. If you've watched 4 or 5 videos this month, maybe you might want to think about giving £10. So there's a link in the description below where you can go to our website and make a donation. And if you want to keep giving, you don't want to worry about making that donation every month, well, you could just set up a standing order, a monthly standing order. That would be really, really helpful. I want to suggest something of the region of maybe £10 or £20 a month if you're able to do that, and that would be really, really helpful and help us keep producing videos like this one. Thanks for listening. Take care of yourself.